Welcome back to another episode of Darkly Speaking. I'm your host, Alex Kern, and tonight we're talking about something that doesn't scream for your attention. It doesn't chase you, it waits, it watches, and it asks to be let in. The black-eyed children have been reported around the world, always just out of place enough to make your skin crawl. They travel in pairs, they knock on your door, they ask for a ride, they speak in flat, robotic voices, and their eyes are pitch black. No whites, no pupils, just empty. They look like kids, but there's no warmth, no fear, no life behind the way they talk, just something pretending to be harmless, something that knows the rules, because every report ends the same way. They can't come in unless you say yes. Tonight, I'll walk you through 5 real encounters, including several from David Weatherly's The Black-Eyed Children book, and we'll dig into the history, the theories, and the disturbing possibility that these things aren't new. And they're not going anywhere, because the most terrifying part isn't what they are, it's what happens when you let them in. Long before the internet, before creepypastas, before viral Reddit threads, there were stories, whispered ones. They didn't call them black-eyed children back then, but they knew the rules. Across cultures, there's a deeply embedded human instinct. Don't open the door after dark. Don't invite what doesn't belong. And whatever you do, don't speak first. In medieval Europe, tales were told of wandering imps or cursed children who would arrive at cottages during storms, asking for food or warmth. Their voices were polite, their clothing out of place, their eyes too dark. If they were invited in, illness followed or death. In Japanese folklore, the yokai hyoban is described as a childlike spirit with black eyes and porcelain skin. It's said to appear during cold seasons, asking to be let in, never demanding, just waiting. Those who invited across the threshold are said to fall ill or be haunted by misfortune. In Middle Eastern lore, certain jinn appear in the guise of children and linger near the home, waiting to be noticed. But it's said that once you speak to them, they have license to follow you. In Christian demonology, demonic forces can't enter a home or a body without permission. The idea of the invitation is central. Free will must be surrendered, even subtly, before evil can cross over. These stories, though separated by oceans and centuries, echo the same archetype. Entities that mimic something harmless, that appear just innocent enough to make you question your instincts, and that wait patiently for one thing: consent. In the 20th century, that archetype evolved, and in 1996, in a Texas parking lot, it stepped fully into the modern world. Abilene, Texas, 1996, it was the kind of ordinary evening you forget as it's happening. Dry, quiet, just another weeknight. Journalist Brian Bethel had pulled into the parking lot outside of a movie theater to write a check to his internet provider. You know, back when that was still a thing, mailing payment for your internet bill. The theater's marquee light provided just enough glow for him to scribble it out from the driver's seat of his car. It was quiet until it wasn't. Brian was about to leave his car when he heard a sudden knock from his driver's side window. He looked up and saw 2 boys standing there. They looked to be about 9 and 12 years old. One was pale with freckles, while the other had olive-colored skin. Both had a ghostly look to them. The older boy tapped again on the glass, not hard, just enough to make it clear. They expected him to respond. Brian rolled down the window just a crack, cautious but curious. The older boy, who was known as the spokesman, said they wanted to see the new Mortal Kombat movie, but had left their money at home. They just needed a ride, not far. They lived nearby. If he could just take them back to get their money, they'd be right back. On paper, it sounded harmless, but as the boy spoke, something inside Brian tensed. He couldn't explain it. His rational brain was trying to follow the conversation, but his body, his gut, was in full revolt. The hairs on his arms stood up, his chest felt tight. His voice didn't waver, but that was the problem. It was too smooth, too measured, like a script he'd rehearsed 100 times. There was no emotion to it, no spontaneity. It was like he was playing a part, but not living it. Brian looked at his hand resting on the gear shift and noticed it was shaking. Brian's eyes snapped upward, and then he saw it. Truly saw it. Their eyes. Black, glossy, endless. Not just pupils dilated in the dark, but complete voids. No whites, no iris, just jet black like wet glass under the marquee lights. Every instinct in Brian's body screamed. As if the boy could sense Brian's fear, he became even more hostile. "We can't come in unless you invite us," he said. "Let us in." Brian's hand twitched toward the door handle, not because he wanted to open it, but because some part of him, deep in the back of his mind, felt pulled, as if under compulsion, like his body was responding to something unseen, something not his own. Then it hit him, a wave of dread so complete it felt primal, like every cell in his body understood what his mind hadn't yet caught up to. He was being hunted. Without another word, without even thinking, he jerked the gear into reverse. Tires squealed. He backed out of the lot and sped off into the dark. He didn't look back. Later, Brian typed out what had happened in an email to his friends. He wasn't looking for attention, he just needed to get it off his chest. But that email got passed around, and then it got reposted. And before long, the story spread fast. The details, the eyes, the feeling of being pulled, the primal fear resonated with people. And soon, others came forward with stories of their own. Encounters that hadn't been shared before, stories that felt eerily familiar. It snowballed into something darker, bigger. What started as one strange night in Abilene became a full-blown digital legend. In interviews, Brian has said it was the most terrified he's ever been in his entire life. And not just in the moment. For years afterward, he suffered nightmares, flashbacks, a sense of something unfinished. And he's not alone. Many who've encountered black-eyed children describe similar aftershocks. It doesn't just end when the kids disappear, it lingers, like the fear carved out a space inside you that never fully goes away. In 2012, David Weatherly released a book that would become a cornerstone of this strange phenomenon. The Black-Eyed Children documented dozens of encounters, not just the now famous story from 1996, but many, many more, stretching back decades. Some of the earliest reports Weatherly uncovered dated all the way back to the 1950s. Different states, different settings, but always the same pattern. Children appearing unexpectedly, speaking in flat, emotionless tones, and always with those same impossible eyes, deep, black, and entirely devoid of life. Whether it was a farmhouse in rural America or a city block, the sightings shared the same eerie details. Always children, always asking to come in. Black-eyed children are typically described as being between the ages of 6 and 16, though a few rare reports include adults with the same unsettling black eyes. Witnesses often note that the children hide their faces, speak with exaggerated politeness, and act strangely formal, like they're mimicking how they think a child should behave. In some cases, witnesses have even reported hearing unnatural, animal-like growls nearby, or being overwhelmed by a foul stench like rotting meat, sulfur, or garbage. But every black-eyed children encounter has two unmistakable hallmarks. One, the moment you see them, an overwhelming wave of dread sets in, primal, irrational, and suffocating. And two, they always want in, into your car, into your home. They ask softly, even sweetly, but they rarely take no for an answer. And some of the people who saw them were the last you'd expect to frighten easily. Late 1990s, somewhere quiet in the Midwest, Paul was the kind of man you'd expect to be unshakable. 6'3" and broad-shouldered, a former prison guard with years of martial arts training behind him. The kind of man whose quiet demeanor masked a lifetime of discipline and confrontation. He'd witnessed things most people couldn't stomach, but what happened that night stayed buried for decades. His wife and son were out of town for a few days. He got home from work, kicked off his boots, and changed out of his uniform. All he wanted to do was catch the game, fix a quick dinner, and enjoy a nice relaxing evening at home. Paul made his way to the kitchen and began making himself some dinner when he heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not pounding, not urgent, but insistent, almost polite. At first he thought maybe it was a neighbor kid or someone selling something. But the knocking came again. He approached the window and parted the curtain to peer out into the night. 2 boys stood on his front porch. Teenagers, maybe 15 or 16 years old. One wore a brown hoodie, the other gray. They stood unnaturally still, staring down at their shoes. Paul had lived on that street for years. He knew every kid in the neighborhood. These weren't them. Maybe they were passing through. Maybe they were lost, but something about their presence gnawed at him. He opened the door, keeping his frame squarely in the doorway. The boys said nothing. They didn't look up. They didn't flinch. Just silence, staring at the ground. Paul stood there for a long beat, the silence pressing in around him. The air felt unusually dense, like it had thickened between them, pressing down on Paul's chest, making every breath feel slower, heavier. His skin crawled with an old instinct, one he hadn't felt in years, the kind that only flares up when something's deeply, dangerously wrong. Finally, he asked what they wanted. The boy in the gray hoodie spoke, still staring at the porch, responding with, "Hey, we just wanted to stop in for a bit." Paul blinked, feeling totally weird about the situation. He thought the kids might have been mistaken, so Paul decided to ask the kids if they knew who he was, thinking maybe, just maybe, the kids had the wrong house. The boy didn't respond, didn't even look up, just repeated, "Can we come in for a bit?" Paul leaned closer to get a better look at the 2 boys, and that's when he saw their eyes. They were completely black, completely obsidian and empty, as if looking into a void of darkness. The kids finally looked up at Paul and met his gaze, and for a split second, time seemed to stop. Their eyes locked with his, and in that moment, something shifted inside him. It was more than fear. Paul felt paralyzed, as if some invisible force had grabbed hold of his limbs and refused to let go. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. It was like the boy was forcing him to remain still with nothing more than a stare. Paul's head swam with dizziness, and a cold sweat broke out across his back. That's when the boy spoke again, telling Paul not to think about it, just let them in. Paul's heart hammered against his ribs, still unable to move or speak. Eventually, he snapped out of it. Paul slammed the door shut and started screaming at the kids to leave him alone. But the knocking resumed. Knock, knock, knock. Panicked, Paul ran down the hallway and into his bedroom, grabbed a loaded pistol, and returned to the front door. By that point, the boys had vanished. No footsteps, no car, no sound of retreat, just an empty porch. The experience left Paul deeply shaken, so much so that he sat up all night in the dark, flinching at every creak and shadow. Sleep never came that night, not even for a moment. The next day, he went door to door asking neighbors if they'd seen or heard anything strange. No one had, so Paul kept the experience to himself, locking it away in the farthest corner of his memory like something fragile and toxic, all at once. It wasn't until years later when he finally spoke of it, when David Weatherly sought him out and asked the right question. Even then, Paul spoke with long pauses, his voice low and deliberate, as if he believed, deep down, that saying it out loud might bring them back. And here's where things start to turn, because while most people slam the door, lock it, and pray they never see those eyes again, not everyone gets away in time. Some open the door, some say yes, and that's when everything changes. A woman we'll call Claire and her husband were spending a quiet winter weekend at a cabin in rural Vermont, a remote, snow-covered spot far from neighbors and cell service. They'd gone there to disconnect, to get some peace, to breathe. That night, the wind howled outside. Snow drifted high around the porch. Claire and her husband were asleep. The fire long burned down to embers. The cabin creaked softly in the cold, and then a loud, urgent banging at the front door jolted them both upright. It was around 2 a.m., and Claire's first instinct was that someone was in trouble, maybe stranded in the storm looking for help. So she slipped on her slippers, heart already pounding, and made her way to the front door. When she glanced through the window, something didn't add up. The snow was untouched, no footprints, no tire tracks, nothing but a perfect, undisturbed sheet of white. And yet, someone was still knocking. The pounding didn't stop. Claire shook her husband awake. We'll call him Steve. Groggy and disoriented, he threw on a sweatshirt and opened the door. And there they were. 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 years old. Heads bowed, no eye contact, drenched in snow but not dressed for the weather. No gloves, no hats, not even proper coats. Just thin, ill-fitting clothes and skin so pale it looked almost translucent under the porch light. Claire stepped closer, adrenaline rising. Something about them felt wrong, not just out of place, but wrong. So she asked the obvious question, "Where are your parents?" The girl finally lifted her head, her voice unnervingly calm. "They'll be here soon. Can we come in?" Every instinct Claire had was screaming. Her gut, her skin, her breath, all telling her the same thing. Don't. But it was freezing, and they were children after all, so despite the fear creeping up her spine, Claire took a breath and stepped aside. Big mistake. Claire moved to the kitchen, trying to calm her nerves with something familiar. Hot cocoa. Steve stayed in the living room with the kids, asking questions in his usual nonsense tone. Was there an accident? Were they lost? How long had they been out there? But the kids didn't answer. They didn't even fidget, didn't glance around. They just stared at the floor, completely still. "Our parents will be here soon." They said it again and again like it was the only line they knew. That's when Steve began to feel dizzy and lightheaded. When Claire returned, she found Steve sitting on the couch, head in his hands. She handed one of the mugs to the girl, but the child didn't move to take it. That's when Claire saw them. Their eyes. She froze. Every thought she had vanished. The kind of fear that doesn't make sense, yet hits you like a wave. The children looked up slowly. "Can we use the bathroom?" They didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked silently down the hallway, side by side. Claire turned to Steve, whispering, "What do we do?" And he didn't answer. Instead, blood began gushing from his nose. She ran to get tissues, heart pounding, mind racing, and just as she reached for the cabinet, the power went out. The house went dark. In the faint moonlight, Claire caught sight of the children again, standing at the end of the hall, perfectly still, staring, silent. Then, in unison, they spoke, but this time, it wasn't flat, it was sing-song, mocking. "Our parents are here." They walked to the front door and let themselves out, leaving it wide open behind them. Steve stepped out onto the porch to see a black car idling at the edge of the snowy driveway. 2 tall figures in black suits stood by the door. Without a word, the children climbed into the back seat. The men followed, and the car drove off into the storm. The power returned 30 minutes later, but nothing felt right. After that night, Steve began experiencing nosebleeds, at first randomly, then more frequently. His doctors were completely baffled. Months later, he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of skin cancer. Claire's health unraveled too. Dizziness, chronic fatigue, unexplained bleeding. Every test came back clean. No answers, no cause, just symptoms. But Claire was certain she knew what changed. It all started the night they let the black-eyed children in. But not all encounters begin at home. Some start in the places we least expect, in broad daylight, on familiar roads, with no warning at all. This next one caught me off guard, because if you think black-eyed kids only show up at night or only come knocking when you're alone at home, think again. This case proves they can show up anywhere, anytime, even in the middle of the day, even when you think you're safe. David Weatherly shared the story of a woman he called Sharon. She was a nurse in a small town in Iowa. Now, we don't know the exact year, but it happened on a Sunday afternoon just after her shift ended. Sharon picked up her son from his grandparents' house and decided to stop at a convenience store for milk and cereal. Her son was buckled in the back seat. She figured it would only take a minute, 2 at most. She ran inside, grabbed what she needed, and came back out. Normal, routine. But the moment she climbed into the driver's seat and glanced at the rearview mirror, her stomach dropped. Someone else was in the car. A boy, sitting in the back seat, around her son's age, same size but completely unfamiliar, and his eyes, jet black. No whites, no iris, just endless void. Sharon didn't think. She moved on instinct and yanked the back door open, grabbed her son without a word, and bolted for the entrance of the store. Her voice cracked as she shouted for help, telling the clerk someone had broken into her car. But when they rushed outside, the SUV was empty. The boy was gone. No open doors, no footprints, no sound, just that awful silence pressing in again. Shaking and terrified, she called her husband Tom. She refused to step foot back in that vehicle. Tom arrived and checked out the car, top to bottom. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of damage, but he caught a smell. Something thick and sour, like soiled diapers left to rot in the summer heat. It clung to the air and made his stomach twist. He told Sharon to take his car and go home. He'd drive the SUV back himself. But somewhere along the drive, something went wrong. Tom lost control of the vehicle and slammed into a telephone pole. The doctor said he had a concussion, but when they asked what happened, he couldn't remember. Not a single detail. Sharon told herself it was over, that whatever she saw in the mirror, whatever was in that car, was gone. But a few days later, her son started coughing. Then came the fever, then a rash. It spread across his skin like wildfire. Angry and red. His eyes grew glassy, his energy vanished, and the worst part, no one could explain it. Every test came back clean. No virus, no infection, just symptoms, like something had passed through him and stayed. And then just like that, it all stopped. 3 weeks later, the symptoms vanished, gone, as if nothing had ever happened. But Sharon never forgot what she saw in that rearview mirror. She never forgot those eyes, and she never stopped wondering, what if that thing didn't just disappear? What if it left something behind? And Sharon isn't the only one who believes that. Let's move into our final documented case, one that brings this phenomenon full circle, because sometimes it isn't the moment you see them that haunts you the most, it's what happens after. This is Beth's story. There are only a handful of stories where someone makes the mistake of letting black-eyed children in, or even worse, coming into direct contact with them. And every one of those stories ends the same way, with something unraveling, illness, disaster, a slow, quiet undoing. In Weatherly's book, there's only one woman who claims she had actual physical contact with one of them. She's referred to only as Beth. It was a regular evening in her apartment when a boy and a girl knocked at her door. Same robotic politeness, same soft voices, same request. Can we come in? Beth didn't open the door. She told them no. But then, without hesitation, the girl lunged forward and grabbed Beth's arm. It wasn't a brush or a graze, it was a grip. Fast, cold, and deliberate. Beth said it felt like being touched by something that had never been alive. The girl's hands were ice cold, not in a wintry way, but in a way that made Beth's blood pull away from the surface of her skin. Her whole body recoiled, like her nerves recognized something ancient, something that didn't belong. And whatever it was, it had touched her now, and the damage was done. The next morning, Beth came down with a stomach virus that knocked her flat. The day after that, someone broke into her car and stole her laptop. By day 3, she lost her job. That same night, her boyfriend of 7 years walked out with no explanation. Feeling cursed, she visited a psychic, and that was when things got even more unnerving. The psychic didn't just tell her that she was cursed, she backed away, said she couldn't help, said it was beyond her, and then she did something no psychic ever wants to do. She offered Beth her money back, because whatever had touched her that night wasn't finished. So here's the question that lingers after every encounter. Are these kids just warning signs, or are they the ones pulling the strings? Are they omens, or are they triggers? And maybe more importantly than any of that, what are they really? Because if you dig deep enough, you'll find that this phenomenon doesn't start in the 90s. It doesn't even start in America. It goes back much, much farther than that. They try to look like children, but they didn't act like any child you've ever met. Their clothes never quite fit right. Sometimes it's like they're wearing outfits from another decade. And their speech? Too polished, too formal, like they're mimicking how they think a kid should talk, but they're getting it just a little wrong. At first glance, they almost pass, but there's always something that doesn't sit right. Something in the way they move, the way they stand too still, the way their smiles never quite reach their eyes, if they smile at all. And then there's the issue of evidence. There really isn't any. They appear, they disappear, and no one ever gets a clear photo. Security cameras glitch, phones freeze, batteries die every time. One guy, just one, claimed he found a strange image buried deep in his photo library. A kid with pitch black eyes. He tried to zoom in, but the second he did, the entire computer crashed. When he finally got it back up and running again, the photo was gone, deleted like it was never there. So maybe that's part of it. The fact that we can't catch them, that all we have are stories, whispers, warnings. But it hasn't stopped the theories. If anything, it's made them louder. Even though reports of black-eyed children exploded in the 90s, there are some who believe this phenomenon isn't modern at all, that it's ancient, older than language, older than recorded history. In 1993, archaeologists digging in southeastern Turkey uncovered something strange, a life-sized stone figure now known as Man. And here's where it gets unsettling. This statue, it's over 11,000 years old, one of the oldest human-shaped statues ever found. And his eyes, two deep, black obsidian stones, polished and piercing, set deep into the face as if it's watching, as if waiting. But here's what really gets me. He has no mouth, just smooth stone where the mouth should be, like he didn't need to speak at all. Like maybe he communicated some other way. No one knows who carved him. The civilization that created Man existed long before written language, but the look of that statue, the black, soulless eyes and silent face, it makes you wonder, was he a god, a guardian, a warning, or something else entirely? And if this figure was meant to represent something people feared or worshipped 11,000 years ago, maybe the black-eyed children aren't new. Maybe they're just returning. And if that hasn't rattled you enough, just know this. Black-eyed beings aren't just a modern phenomenon. They've shown up before in old stories, in ancient carvings, in folklore tied to everything from demons to spirits to visitors that don't belong in our world. Different names, but the same eyes. Whatever these things are, they've been here before. All across Asia, there are stories of the dead who don't stay quiet. Spirits so consumed by obsession or hunger, they keep roaming long after the body is gone. They're called hungry ghosts, and they're terrifying. They crave food, wealth, sometimes even corpses, and no matter how much they get, it's never enough. Most versions describe them with bulging bellies and pin-thin necks, cursed to hunger forever. But sometimes they're said to have black eyes, jet black, just like the children. There's one story out of southern China that hits a little too close to home. A village haunted by the ghost of a teenage girl. Pale skin, long black hair, a flowing white dress, and eyes that made people shudder. She was seen going door to door, gently knocking, asking to come inside. Those who let her in, well, they were never the same. Sickness, death, disasters that spread like wildfire. The entire village blamed her, and eventually they brought in a Taoist priest. He performed a ritual, something like an exorcism, and not long after that, the chaos stopped. The village's luck returned, but the image stuck. A soft knock, a pale face, eyes black as night, and a question that still echoes in the dark. Will you let me in? If we're going to talk about exorcisms, we're about to talk about demons. It might sound dramatic, but one of the most persistent and deeply rooted theories about black-eyed children is that they're demonic in nature. BEKs share some striking similarities with what are traditionally described as demonic entities. For one, they don't just inspire fear, they trigger full-on panic, the kind that bypasses your brain and hits straight in the gut. And then there's the eyes, completely black, void of anything human. And if the eyes really are the windows to the soul, what does it mean when there's just nothing? That kind of emptiness is often associated with malevolent energy. It's why you see the same visual used in pop culture over and over again. black eyes equals evil, essentially. But this goes beyond fiction. There are real people who swear they've seen someone's eyes go black right before something violent or unnatural happened. A woman named Donna Anderson once wrote about the moment her abusive ex-husband attacked her. She said his eyes went from blue to solid black, just like a BEK. And even with the Catholic Church, there are whispers. Archbishop Ronald Phelan-Wright, a chief exorcist, once stated that in true demonic possessions, the human body can change, including the eyes. Pitch black, empty, consumed. And if demons do exist, then maybe, just maybe, there's something or someone who hunts them. Some people believe the black-eyed children aren't supernatural at all, that there's something else entirely. Something not from here. If you've ever heard abductee stories, you know the description. Small, gray body, oversized head, and enormous jet black eyes. Completely alien, but also oddly familiar. One experiencer said the eyes weren't just black. They were hypnotic, that staring into them caused hallucinations, as if something inside those eyes was reaching back. So, when you line it all up, the emotionless speech, the eerie calm, the black eyes, the sudden sickness, it starts to feel less like a haunting and more like an observation. Like maybe they're watching, learning, waiting to slip into something more familiar. But here's where it gets weird, because a lot of people talk about this intense urge to say yes, to open the door, to let them in, and yet most people don't. They fight it off, they slam the door, they drive away. So if these kids are using some kind of mind control or hypnosis, they're not very good at it, right? Unless the pull isn't coming from them. What if it's coming from us? What if the real question isn't who they are, but why certain people see them at all? We all know what fear does to the brain. You're sitting in the dark, you hear something creak, suddenly your brain turns it into footsteps, a shadow, something worse. So maybe the black-eyed children are just a high-octane version of that, a psychological glitch, an anxious mind filling in the blanks, people seeing black eyes because it was late, they were alone, maybe they just binged a horror show, maybe their brain did the rest. But here's the thing I can't shake. Why does that fear stick around for years? Why do people get sick afterward? Why do so many different people across states, decades, and cultures describe the same exact thing? Why would a prison guard feel hunted by two teenagers on his front porch? For me, the fear theory explains some of it, but not all of it. I don't think this is mass hysteria. I don't think it's a viral trend. I don't even think this is all alien. Because the details are too specific, the patterns are too weird, and no one, not one person, has ever gotten a photo, a video, nothing. They appear, they vanish, they leave you shaken, changed, cursed. And when something doesn't behave like anything else we know, that to me says it's not just psychological. It's something else entirely. They don't scream, they don't break in, they knock, they ask, and they wait. Because what they're really testing is you. And if you ever hear that knock, soft, deliberate, polite, and see those black empty eyes just outside the door, all they need is for you to invite them in. Thanks for listening to another episode of Darkly Speaking. If you've encountered something you can't explain, send it in. We're listening. You can connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at Darkly Speaking Podcast and visit our website at darklyspeakingpodcast.com. I'll see you next week for a brand new episode. Until then, if you hear a knock, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't let them in.